Paramahansa Yogananda, The Second Coming of Christ, Book 1, Section The Inner Jerusalem. The woman said unto him, Sir, I perceived that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. John 4:19-20. Thus, the woman of Samaria was convinced that Jesus was a prophet of God. And then she asked him if Jerusalem, or the mountains where her forefathers worshipped, was the right place to worship. And Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such a worship to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. John 4:21-24. Herein Jesus spoke of the inner Jerusalem of self-realization, the sacred mountain of meditation where true souls, devout devotees of God, worship him in the temple of true spiritual communion. Though the quiet top of mountains and the holy places, sanctified by the presence of masters, are also fit places to worship, yet they are of no use to restless, materially minded people. Many worldly people have built temples on hilltops and lived in places of pilgrimage, only to make those places dens of matter worship. That is why Jesus said that true worshippers find God in the temple of omnipresence and worship him not in the imagined communion of silence, but in the true communion of spiritual perception. Millions of people today worship God in temples and churches and in holy cities without ever knowing him. The reason is obvious. God can only be found in the temple of true intuition, the tabernacle of deep meditation. Jesus distinctly spoke of the difference between the theological priestly ceremonious worship God and the saintly way of worshipping God in the temple of intuition. A gorgeous temple worth millions of dollars could not lure God by its display of wealth, although it might draw an audience of aristocratic people who love to worship God in the comfort of flesh on cushioned velvet seats. The omnipresent God who lives in the temple of the cosmos, with the star-decked dome of eternity, illumined by suns and moons, cannot be lured into the pride-created atomic church of man. In fact, thousands of ministers are so engrossed by church property and the church business of keeping the religious customers together that they forget to meditate and thus establish the church of God within themselves. To worship God on mountains or in holy places is useless unless one really finds him in the spirit. Though God is manifest everywhere, he is in essence present behind the veil of nature. The devotee has to live the veil of nature and see God first that way. After that, the devotee can see God behind nature. So Jesus said that most people do not know what they worship, but that true devotees who worship God in the temple of meditation truly commune with his omnipresent spirit, and therefore they know what he is and where he can be communed with. Jesus also said, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Spirit signifies the unmanifested absolute presence in the darkless dark and the lightless light. In the unmanifested absolute, even the categories of space, time and dimension are non-existent. There abides only ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new, blissful Spirit. The word God means the manifested, transcendental being beyond creation, but existing in relation to creation. When creation is dissolved into God, then this God becomes Spirit, the unmanifested Absolute. Jesus said that as long as a devotee is conscious of manifested creation and of the delusive things such as mountains and holy cities, and has the desire to meditate in them, he has not yet attained the ultimate state of enlightenment, and that true worshippers are the reflections of God, the Father, of material creation, God manifested as the guiding intelligence of creation, is the Spirit in unmanifested state when creation is dissolved. Man, being a reflection of God, is a reflection of the unmanifested Spirit. Hence, a true worshipper, if he wants to know the truth about God and himself, must know that God and his soul are reflections of the unmanifested Absolute. That is, the Spirit, being unmanifested Absolute, wants all his true devotees to know that they are its emanations. A devotee, unless he knows that the Father of creation or God can exist in the absolute unmanifested state as pure, ever-conscious bliss, without the shadows of imperfect creation, does not know the truth about nominal substance, but is deluded by phenomena, or by the appearance of truth in creation. All devotees who worship God as the manifested intelligence of creation are gradually taught by him to worship him as the unmanifested Absolute, or Spirit. That is why Jesus said, "But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him." God is divine intelligence in creation. Spirit is divine intelligence with creation dissolved in him. Hence any devotee who can only see God as the Father of creation, of nature, mountains, and so forth, is still in delusion. The true devotee must learn that God is Spirit, unmanifested Absolute, and must understand the truth about him as being the ever-existent, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss, without the delusion of a material cosmos. It is then that the devotee finds emancipation and becomes one with the Spirit. To truly worship God is to worship him in the nature and beyond nature, to worship the substance and the delusive phenomena in it, to worship the ocean of God and its delusive waves of creation. Since the waves of creation in appearance, not in essence, distort the ocean of creation, God, the true vision of God lies in the perception of this spirit ocean without the waves of creation, to see as unmanifested spirit and the only existing substance, truth, without experiencing the delusion of matter or phenomena. It is only by worshipping God and nature, and then by worshipping God as unmanifested spirit, that the devotee reaches the final state of emancipation, from which there is no fall. Hence, worshippers who see God as Spirit and the only true substance existing become emancipated. Under the sunlight, you may close your eyes and create a darkness of your own, and live and move in it. When you open your eyes, darkness is no more. So the consciousness of matter is due to our closing the eye of wisdom. When the wisdom eye is opened, the consciousness of relativity, of the pleasure, good and evil, and so forth, disappear. And the spirit, as ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new joy, is perceived as the only existent substance. Then all creation, with all the attending evils, are found to be created by ignorance, and all darkness and fears are created by closing the eyes and not by the absence of the light, which always knocks at the closed gates of the eyes to get in. Modern ministers should learn to worship God in the temple of supercommunion or samadhi, where the cosmos, like the shadow of darkness, appears non-existent with the opening of the eye of wisdom before the light of the only existing spirit. And the woman said unto him, I know that the Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. And Jesus said unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. And upon this came his disciples, and marveled. He talked with the woman, yet no man said, What seekest thou? Or why talkest thou with her? The woman then left her water pot, and went her way into the city, and said to the men, Come, see a man, which told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? Then they went out of the city, and came unto him. In the meanwhile, his disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. But he said unto them, I have meat to eat, that ye not know of. Therefore said the disciples one to another, Has any man brought him aught to eat? Jesus said unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. John 4:25-34. When the woman of Samaria said, I know that the Messiah, and the word Messiah comes from the Hebrew word Messiach, or anointed, the expected king and deliverer of the Hebrews, Christ. Christ is Latin, Christus, Messiah, cometh, and so on. She had unconsciously received the telepathic message of God and Christ's presence as to who Jesus was. Most of the time, great saints purposely remain hidden, and unless they choose someone to know of their greatness, they cannot be recognized even by people intimately mixing with them. In this case, God wanted to declare the glory of Jesus through the woman of Samaria, who was being made a test case of the spiritual healing of souls. This woman of Samaria, who had 5 husbands, was healed of her evil life through the spiritual healing of Jesus. Jesus confirms and thereby reinforces her telepathic message by letting her know the truth about himself.